Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of my Genealogy Live interviews. They say the number 13 is unlucky in Ireland. So let's hope this isn't unlucky and hope that everything actually goes smoothly. I mean, I don't believe in 13 being unlucky, but I may be a believer depending on how this goes. Anyway, so my guest tonight is the outreach manager and marketing manager. I think I probably got that wrong. For FindMyPast, I'm gonna just do a quick intro, or else I'll probably butcher it afterwards. Myko Clelland.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, Myko. Well, I hope fairly well after that intro, because I think I probably got a few things wrong.
I think just genealogist is good enough. I
Yeah,
think
I should have just probably left it there rather than just kind of jazz it up or anything. But no. Well, if you don't hear from me afterwards, this will be why. But no. So I figure we may as well get into it before I embarrass myself any further. So for anyone watching that might necessarily know you, Myko, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm Myko Clelland. I work for FindMyPast, which is a British-owned, British-based family history website that specialises in British and Irish research. So I've been a genealogist with them, and I've been working with them for, I think it's my actual 9th anniversary this week. So I've been there for quite some time. You get less for a lot of crimes, but I have a master's degree in genealogy, which I got at the University of Strathclyde. And I've been doing genealogy from childhood, from being sort of around about 11 years old or so. So I've been doing it for a long time and turned a hobby and a passion into a career. And so all of the records on FindMyPast, my responsibility is going to different archives, libraries, family history societies, and finding the great records that people can use to uncover and discover their ancestors, and arranging to get them onto the website and put them in a nice way that everyone can find all those great magic moments that make family history exciting.
Oh yeah, and I mean I've used FindMyPast quite a bit in my research, especially seeing as mine is primarily Irish, and yeah, I don't think I think I'm very plain in that sense. It's just from like 2 bits of Ireland. So I don't. It's like it's not anything thrilling like where Mayo is on the map of Ireland. There's Sligo next to it, so it's not as thrilling as if they were born in Mayo but they moved to Sligo. It's nothing as interesting. It's just they were born, they lived, they married, they died in the same place.
That's fairly typical, I think. In Ireland, I've got ancestors from Ireland, from Limerick. My grandfather's from Limerick, and I've got a few from County Derry and County Down as well, which is the Scottish side of me. A lot of Irish came over the 1840s up to the western side of Scotland. But definitely, Irish research it's more about lateral thinking and about going around the core records that you might. Every country that you do research in, you have to apply a new set of rules. It's like you've got this new canvas and you have paint and you're using a different brush, and you still got the same paints, but you've got to work out how to put the paints on the canvas again, and you use a different brush. So in Ireland, you haven't got the censuses you might have somewhere else or something else, but you have things like dog licenses and petty sessions and things that other countries can only dream of. So it's kind of, you get one thing with one hand and it's taken away with another, and you just have to get more used to the things that you've got at your disposal, and hopefully you still get the same results, but there's always a little bit of luck of the Irish that you need to make sure you get there.
Well, I mean, if luck of the Irish is a thing, then it's a myth in my family, because I mean, like out of my great grandparents, I can probably do 7 conclusively. It's just this one branch where I'm struggling. Because I had been given the name, and I've just been following the documentation with what I've been given, and reinforced with a family Bible that a cousin had. And from what it would appear, like my great grandmother, Delia Lavin, her mother, Anne Brennan, is the one I'm dealing with, which is who I replied to on a tweet that FindMyPast talked about fairly recently. And because it honestly seemed as if Anne had given birth to my great-grandmother at the age of 12 or 13, like something ridiculously young. And I'm kind of thinking, this can't be right. I mean, there is one Anne Brennan for an 1865, which I originally thought was her, but then I found a death index, and it's the only Anne Brennan, considering there was another Anne Brennan in 1870, which looks to be the one that lived. So the 1866
going about it the right way.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd be questioning what on earth she was thinking, and which is why I'd like to have a nice chat with her, and more importantly, to try and get a photo, because I don't have any.
And there are stories to be uncovered, and I think it's possible that they could have had a child at that age. It's very unlikely, but it's kind of, perhaps I would say, if you've got a baptism or something at that age, maybe they were baptized at a slightly older age, and they might have been, 3 or 4 when they were baptized or something like that. I think I know that you're right on the edge of,
I really hope you're right. But no, that's probably about as most thrilling as mine gets. But no, what part of Limerick did you say you was coming?
The centre of it, the Limerick city.
Oh right. Well, probably quite a bit from where mine is. Mine's Clash or Newcastle West. So it's a bit away. This one I thought I'd be on another cousin, and I was.
Well, this is a running thing, I think, with the FindMyPast lives that we do, and every time I present one, it seems a new cousin appears out of the woodwork, and it's become almost a tradition. And I don't know how long it will keep going for. And I always break up with laughter because I never expect it, and someone will say, "Oh, by the way, I'm looking for these relatives." And I go, "Hang on, they're my ancestors." And I don't know if someone's given out my family tree to someone else, and they're just pulling from names from the hat. But it's been quite interesting. Yeah, I think for a moment, there was a few weeks ago when we were all talking about a certain parish in the West Midlands in Staffordshire, and the trade that went on there, the gunlock makers and things, and they had a really interesting tale in that they were very rich during the Napoleonic Wars. They made the parts for guns for all of these conflicts, and all the British Army, all the guns that were made had parts from Darlaston and around there, Staffordshire. And then, of course, the wars ended, and those people who were going from working 2 days a week and having 3 different kinds of meat and a bottle of wine with every meal suddenly couldn't afford to put food on the table because they were absolutely destitute, and they went to be very, very poor indeed. And I mentioned the name and discussed this story, and everyone said, "I know, I've got a White House family from there." So, and someone else said, "I have some White House," and it became a sort of like Spartacus, where everyone was stepping up and saying, "Wait, I know, I've got White House ancestors from there." And I think we probably connected about 5 or 6 people, and it's amazing how even people that you don't imagine have any connection, sometimes you'll find they are cousins. And Ellie, who also works with FindMyPast, who does these presentations, there's a pretty high chance that we're about 5th cousins as well from our Welsh side. So it seems it just keeps happening. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're cousins as well. I've kind of got used to it by now.
No, like you said, down in Derry, about as north as I can get is Mayo, but I mean that's kind of northwest. So small and slim chance somehow. But yeah, I seem to be it's kind of sad, but also good in a way, because I seem to be the only kind of like family genealogist kind of, documenting this and actually doing the research. I have a few family members who do, so like it on and off, like they make notes and something and then they pass it on to me because, I'm the crazy one in the family.
That's more common than you think. There's always one in each family, and that's why it's nice when we gather together and we can be each other's support, because everyone around the table has heard the story over and over and over, and they kind of expect it now. And some people are interested in what you find. Some people really just wish you'd never start talking, and there's those people as well, and they say, "You'll never guess what our great-great-grandfather did," and they say, "Oh, tell me." Yeah, really? And there's those people as well. But I think when we can stand on each other's shoulders and we can work together, whether you're connecting with a distant cousin or you're just talking to someone who's researching the same area, or even people who are just interested in genealogy, the hobby itself and being able to share it makes it less of a solitary thing. It used to be something that was indulged in by very rich, aristocratic, entirely white men. And now it's been democratized in a new way because of the fact that you don't now go to a church and transcribe a parish worth of records, and that is your way to find your ancestors. And if you haven't got the time because you're working, then you just can't do it. Now we have things like digitization. We have societies, people that have stepped on the top of these records and built over and carried on, made family trees. Perhaps we can search and we can compare and contrast. We've got DNA. All of those things really democratize genealogy and mean that anyone can start and anyone can find things. And whatever we make as well, the big thing that I always try and remember is that we're only the custodian of the family history. Who someone else will take it on, whether it's a nephew, niece, son, daughter. Could be anyone in the family. It could even be a distant cousin. But we're building something and making something, and someone else will then continue to add to it and keep going. And there are many resources that are still in libraries and archives, and plenty that I get surprised almost every week when someone tells me about a resource that I've never heard of, which actually is exactly the most exciting thing that I might need for my research. I think only recently I was looking at library books being checked in and out of a library in Fife. And you've got the name of the person, their address, which book they chose, so you can get a bit of an idea of their personality. And this goes back to the 1700s. So you can see distant ancestors trying to read certain books, someone trying to learn Persian or possibly because he's going to try and apply to work for the civil service and work in India, things. And these kind of little things, you just have no expectation that they exist or survive until someone says, have you thought of this? And that's one of the great things about networking and talking to other genealogists, because no one, no matter how much they may say, is an expert in all parts of genealogy. And even the people that are an expert in a certain area still have these things that could surprise them and shock them and get them really excited. And every time that they appear, they might be the single key to unlock 5 or 6 new generations. And so being able to go back to this 10 years later, where right now it might be quite difficult, in another 10 years, this might fall away like paper. It might be really simple. And my uncle used to be the family genealogist, my great uncle. And when he died, all of his collection of different records and different family trees scribbled on paper was put in a suitcase, and I got to see it some years ago, and I could see exactly where he'd stopped and struggled and hit things. And in Scotland, the death certificate, you've got details of people's parents, but that's given by an informant, and that informant will give it you as best as they can remember. So they might not have got things quite right. And they said for my great-great-grandmother, her parents were from the Western Isles. Of course, they weren't. They were from Northern Ireland, because their McPhee was actually McAfee, and they changed it to sound a little bit more Scottish and fit in. But the fact that they got this wrong memory and said, oh, well, the records I'm looking for are in the Western Isles. And this was a day before, this was in the 70s, before technology and before the way you could just check and search millions of records at the touch of a button. He spent many a weekend and many a week traveling up to the Western Isles and looking in churches and looking in places and going to archives and libraries. He never found an answer. And so he never got any further back. Whereas I managed to find them arriving from County Derry, and I found the family and found her as the first daughter born in Scotland from this Irish family, found the siblings, and went back another 3 or 4 generations. And to me, it wasn't something that was quite hard at all. It was relatively straightforward, but it was the fact that I had that extra tool at my disposal. And so in another 20 years, who knows the sort of things that we're going to have access to. And in 50 years, 60 years, the mind boggles. And so the next custodian of this family history is going to have a different challenge, and it's not going to be about finding records. It's going to be about interpreting records and understanding which is the correct record, because you might then have 20 possible records, and the right one is now trying to work out exactly through the little details, like you did with your great grandmother, trying to see which is the plausible answer and making separate logical conclusions and working through. So it's a more of a Sherlock Holmes style thing rather than being a investigator in the first place.
Well, I mean, you'd kind of see more of a Sherlock Holmes than I would. I mean, you got the outfit for it. I mean,
haven't got the hat, but I'll work on it.
Oh, please do. That'd be brilliant. Anyway, What started it all off? Because, like you said, you got started at the age of 11, around, I think you said. So you've been doing it quite a while. But what started it all off for you?
I think, I mean, I did in Britain, at least, there's a school project everyone does about that age. And I researched some First World War soldiers, and that was always interesting. But I used to always hear these stories from my grandmother about the old country and about time in Sicily and about all the heritage that our family had. And there were these really wild, outlandish stories that never seemed to quite be plausible. And as I got older and I managed to do a lot of family history and found out that a lot of these stories had grains of truth in, I could follow them back and find out these amazing tales about the Crown Prince of Italy trying to pay for my great-grandmother's medication and all kinds of things that I found evidence for and details and documents. And also the family that my Italian family had separated from, as my grandmother married a Scotsman and moved to Britain. And there was an estrangement. And over many years, I could find the American branch of the family, things like that, and bring them together. And they knew the stories without having to be told, because it was still, and they went, oh, wow, they were really surprised that we were still around, but also they knew these stories because they've been passed down from their parents. And the person that paid for my great grandmother to go and see a doctor in Palermo was the father of the person that I stayed with in New Jersey when I went to see them. And all these connections come together. And my grandmother wrote this book to keep this memory down. And there are a few copies still. I think it's very almost self-published, but there's a few on Amazon and things. But I keep that copy of that book really close, and I like to read that because it's a story of my grandparents' marriage and their grand romance, and they always try and inspire me with that. And they had their 70th wedding anniversary in January, and I spent a long time getting all of these people to send well wishes. I had the Pope sent a thing. I had the president of Malta. All of these kind of very distant places that they'd had a connection to, visited, or even just knew existed. I sent there's the Kyrgyz ambassador for Republic of Kyrgyzstan sent a yurt tarpaulin or something strange, and all of these great gifts were coming in and things. But it was that inspiring romance, a love story, all of the tales of everything that went on, all of the daring do. I was raised on those stories, and they always were quite inspiring. And then when there was a chance to get into records and find more, that got even better. And now I really relish going back to my grandparents and telling them things about their family they didn't know. And one of the great moments I remember with the local newspapers that we publish a lot of is that my Scottish family don't really have any photographs of any of their family members because they were all thrown out in the 70s. I think lots of families have that kind of problem. And I found a photograph of my grandfather's grandfather in one of these newspapers in an obituary. And he'd never seen a photograph of his grandfather. His grandfather died when he was 3, and he had no memory of him. And it was just a great thing to send that picture and say, here's your grandfather. And I'd never seen him as well. And I can see a slight family resemblance. I enjoyed that, and I could see, but it's just nice to follow these things through. And I know there are many people that will never get photographs for. We might get a physical description in a certain record. Military records are really good for that. There's others as well. Merchant Navy records, even criminal records are exciting for that kind of thing. But it's magical when you can get a photograph, and there are records with photographs, and there are more of those coming on all the time, and many other places to find them. And so there's always a chance. And that amazing moment. So when I started working for FindMyPast, I was thrown in the deep end and went to this event called Who Do You Think You Are Live, which is a big conference that used to go on every year. And I was stood next to someone, and they spent some time going through their family history and looking for something. And I found a photograph of their grandfather there in the Merchant Navy Seaman records, and they burst into tears. They were so happy. They said, oh, it looks just like my dad. And they were really, really happy and exciting. And that feeling of being able to share that moment and know that around the world, no matter what anyone's doing, I'm sitting having dinner, or I'm going to watch Eurovision later on, something like that. It's somewhere someone is going to find a massive discovery and find something, and they're going to be crying tears of joy because of some record that's been digitized and put online, or something they've done with their family tree, some message they've got from a cousin. And sharing in that feeling is it's worth more than it's priceless. There's no way you can put a value to that, and that's why family history is so inspiring and why it's so exciting to be involved in some way. And I'm just helping to put the tools on the table, and there's lots of people that are excitedly making the puzzle themselves and building it together. But it's just really thrilling and exciting to be part of their journey in some small way, even though they're of course doing all the work, and they're going to get the wonderful discovery at the end.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I guarantee you, I wouldn't be surprised if they're wedged in the ceiling joists, or sorry, not the ceiling, the roof joists of the houses that my ancestors lived in. Because out of my 8 great-grandparents, I have all of them from my mother's grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Although I was very close to not having one, because she died in 1941 as a young mother of TB. Mm-hmm. On my dad's side, I can get one set of his grandparents, and the other not a sausage, which is really irritating, because I could find, the photos of the siblings of my great-grandparents, but not the great-grandparents themselves, which is a bit annoying, considering that they died in 1965 and 1970, and yet I could get ones of his other grandparents who died in 1957 and 1963. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they're stashed behind something, or like someone's hiding it from me, because I know, right, that's the collection finished. On to the next one.
Mashing through. There's always, they call them brick walls for a reason, but they can be broken down. So even a drop of water continually will wear something away and erode, and eventually you'll get through it. So definitely, with all the different things that are arriving online, or with all the different new techniques and new different ways to research, there's definitely always hope, I think.
You mentioned about criminal records. Probably about the next most thrilling thing. Now, the problem is, he had the most common name, which is John Loftus. And in Mayo, Loftus is as common as Smith. So I had a John Loftus, who would be, I think, my 3 times great-grandfather, was supposedly imprisoned for stealing. No, not stealing. And I kid you not when I say this, for having material to make shoes. Did they not wanting to make shoes or something? Were they really that bad? Or
it depends where the material came from.
Well, I'm an angel, Myko. I'm just hoping that the ones before me were too. No. But no, I haven't a clue, and I can't really prove it, because I'm talking about maybe 1850s, and the further back you go, the kind of bit scarcer the Irish records are going to be. So
there is that quote: "He who has not fools, knaves, and beggars in his family has been begotten by a flash of lightning." So I think everyone has a criminal ancestor or a black sheep or something like that in there. So I wouldn't be ashamed at all. I think a lot of people are quite proud of their ne'er-do-wells that they have lurking.
Well, I would if I had them. I mean, I would if I had them. I mean, I guess I do, because my 2 times great-grandfather, and I keep going back to this, himself and his son-in-law, my great-grandfather, were quite big rebellious figures in the 1920s, shall we say. And I'm at the moment, I'm trying to find, but I keep literally hitting my head against the wall. Don't worry, I'm not actually hitting my head, but because my great-great-grandfather was supposedly imprisoned in County Down, Ballykinlar to be exact, for 2 years as a 72-year-old man, from an ordeal from which he never recovered. Still don't know what it is, and I'm probably never going to find out, because that's all it says in the newspapers, which, by the way, I did look on FindMyPast for.
Yes, so there's many of those that are still to be digitized, and we had about 100,000 pages a week. So definitely go back and look at those, and don't limit yourself to the newspapers of the local area. Look at these stories are often syndicated, so they might be anywhere across Ireland, and maybe even in Britain itself.
Yeah, he had a peculiar name, so I did kind of like a full cultural blow.
That's the way to do it. Yeah.
Search. So even when I did that, it wouldn't appear, or nothing would tell me what the hell he did. But knowing why, he probably caused a riot if he was up in there for 2 years. But I'm not going to ask, and I'll eventually find out, I hope.
There are some great records. I said the ones that aren't online and things. I really enjoy a set of records at the National Archives in Kew about all of the Second World War people that were watched, that had either particularly right-wing or left-wing views. And the reports on them go into really considerable detail about the people they hang around with, the people that they are, the places that they are. All of those details really paint a huge picture of these people, and many of them are just trade unionists or people that someone else reported who might not have really strong views, but exposed some kind of opinion at some point, which made them go onto a list. And so there are some really interesting documents involved in those people who have, different from the mainstream opinions. And so whether that's during the troubles in Ireland in the early 20th century, or other elements of history, all the way through the very tumultuous 20th century, all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, and the aforementioned son-in-law, I found an article on. Because he was kind of more active than his father-in-law, the fact that, he was getting on for 60-something and he was, spring chicken at 20 or 30, he was a commander in the IRA. And because he was kind of, not so much hunted a lot, but kind of, I don't even know. Probably he was kind of, becoming a bit notorious. And because his father's residence was apparently being, searched quite a lot, I found an article saying, that his father was tempted on just handing the key to his house over to the police because they kept coming by and looking in his house and searching it so much. It was just kind of the feeling that you got from it was just like, right, here's the keys, just go look whatever you want. You come by often enough. And yeah. So that's the only thing that I can think of. I mean, but I'd really like to find something on my father's side because, it's just farmers. And they're slowly driving me nuts because it's just farmers. There's nothing I can find on them. They didn't, do anything scandalous or do anything, and, they didn't get a slap on the wrist or something, or they didn't get a little mention in the local newspaper. Zilch, zippo, nothing.
Well, there's something quite inspiring about the people that aren't notorious, but they've raised large families in really difficult times. I like looking at Griffith's valuation and seeing the maps of the areas of where my ancestors are from, because I know some genealogists don't realise that those numbers on the Griffith's valuation correspond to plots on the large map, and you can take a look at the exact place that your ancestor grew up, and being able to get a hold of a copy of that. And I've been looking at framing something like that for my new house, and seeing just exactly where my ancestors lived, and knowing the social history and the context and things. They might not have had a storied past, but they've definitely got a story, and it's maybe a humbler one, but it's no less inspiring because of the hard circumstances they'll have gone through. So there's definitely still something to draw from, I think. It's just obviously not as good around the dinner table, but they're every single ancestor is a part of you in some form. So they all have a story to tell, and it's our job then to continue and tell that story, no matter what the story may be. Yeah,
I just realized we're coming up to 30 minutes and I've just asked you 2 questions. Okay. I mean, this may be a long one, folks, so hang on tight. But no, just kind of thinking, there was supposedly this story that was going through my family that because my great-grandfather had married twice, but on the second one, he didn't put down widower. He still put down bachelor. And I was kind of thinking, that's weird of you. Like, typically people would stick down widower. His siblings that had a previous marriage, whose wife or husband had died, they put down themselves as widow or widower, but he didn't. And then I found that from a family member, a number of family members told me kind of roughly the same story. But from what I was told, like one, I guarantee you, one added a lot of flair, and one just, just kind of told it as it is. The story with the added flair was supposedly that my great grandfather supposedly killed his first wife. Supposedly, yeah. I don't know where the hell that came from. I mean, that was probably just the added flair. But I found her death certificate, and it was what is it? Severe morning sickness.
Okay.
Because during her pregnancy, so. Yeah. And that was the story that my uncle told me, and I thought, right, you just confirmed it then, because I was kind of thinking, well, I don't think the added flair was kind of really that believable somehow, because I think somehow that'd be in the newspaper somewhere, wouldn't you? Yeah. But supposedly the story was that he was kicked off the land, and this bit was the same. He was kicked off the land. He lost everything practically the day that she died, and so they got married March 13th, 1910. She died in that June. And then March 15th, 1911, a year and 2 days later, he marries my great-grandmother. And thankfully, and I'm really happy that they did it, 2 weeks before census night.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah. That made it really nice, because it kind of just, said under one, and I thought, yes, easy. And yeah, that I'm really happy that they did. Anyway, before I completely bore the viewers with me just rambling on, what resources have you found most helpful?
Oh, that's a question. I think it would depend on where your ancestors are from and what's going on. But I mean, we've talked about newspapers, and newspapers are fascinating mainly because they cover the things that you don't get in official records. The bits of life that you won't find anywhere else, like school play or perhaps someone having a fight in a street. There's a really famous one that I like to share about a Victorian girl frightened to death by a donkey. All of these stories that are in there, some of them drawn, handwritten illustrations, the things that are quite exciting. If you get court documents, for example, your court proceedings will tell you who was charged, what the verdict was, who was presiding, maybe the names of some witnesses, the charge that was put in front of them, and then the sentence. But if you go to a newspaper, you might have someone saying, okay, this person took the stand, this is what they said, this is what happened. And you get the detail, the color, the extra things that make things come together. And all records in family history are like a sort of process, like a timeline. You start to put things together on a list and work out what's missing, work out where things are. But the newspapers give you that extra sort of structure around the documents that you found, the official things, and they give you perhaps sometimes a little bit of understanding and reasoning as to why things are what they are. So those would be the records that I would, or the documents I would look at most, and I would get most excited by, particularly with the wonderful pace of digitization of those things. Because back in the day of having to go page by page on a microfilm reader, microfiche, that was a real hard slog, and that was really difficult. But also monumental inscriptions are fantastic, and anything on a cemetery path which has that wonderful description of a whole family, all the names of the relatives, their ages, that's the one thing that I wish to find most of all, because I can kill off, as we say, a branch of my family at once, and I can say, okay, there we go. And only relatively recently I've got quite a good Irish surname that is quite rare, and so far everyone that is doing research on this family, the Whisker family, are all descended from the same couple who lived in Inch in County Down. And this child called Salisbury Whisker was someone who was a complete mystery to me. And I actually thought it was a male name for a while, and I found out it was a girl's name, and they married a William Monaghan. I never found out what happened. I thought with a name like that, it should be easy. Monumental inscription gave me William Monaghan's death, his place of death, location, Salisbury Whisker's death, place of death. I knew they had 3 children. I found they actually had 5 children. I had their dates, their years of birth, where they died, their ages, their dates of death. So that gave me all the information to find them on censuses, to do all this. And I just suddenly unlocked a whole family really, really quickly. And so I love finding those. And there are hosts of them that have been created, not only by family history societies, and some have been indexed and digitized and published online. Some are available still in book form by these family history societies, but also there are some very, very old books, because some of the ways that these stones can erode over time, maybe 150 years later, the stones can't be read. And so some of the older books that you might find on something like archive.org that talk about a county's memorials from the 17 and 1600s, you might still find the information there in a stone that now you could probably find, but you wouldn't think it was anything other than a paving slab or something like that, because everything is completely worn away. So even those older books that are there and preserved are really, really useful. So monumental inscriptions, either in person, if I can get somewhere and I can take a look. And I'm still itching to get over to Ireland and find some in, some of these cemeteries that I know. I said the Whisker family, there's a cemetery near somewhere called Ballyreen in Inch, and I need to go there and find those inscriptions, because I've seen some written down. I want to maybe take some pictures if they're still there. But also there are all of these books, and the books will hopefully help, especially when you're looking at a cemetery that you don't even know if someone's there. You can forearm yourself and prepare, and you can get a feel for which stones are there and maybe know if you're on a wild goose chase or not.
Yeah, I think all I can hope is, that the thing is still there, and you kind of go like, right, I came over here for this, and there's nothing here. But I mean, yeah, when you said Whisker, I mean, yeah, that is a peculiar name. I mean, I haven't come across that, or I'm assuming it's probably a local name, or well, not a local, but kind of like probably more common to where you're searching than probably other places.
I think so. I think it might be originally Scandinavian or something like that long ago, and so I imagine it may be, as it's an Ulster name, in County Down. I think it may have come over the plantations or something like that, because I have found a few that I haven't connected yet in Yorkshire, in sort of Northumberland and places like that. So I imagine they may be part of the family that never came over or something. But so far, every genealogist that I've spoken to that's researching that family are all descended from the same couple that are in County Down, and they had about sort of 11 children. And everyone's descended from one of those 11 or so children. So it just keeps going down. And I'm hopeful that eventually I'll find some photographs or something like that. And I did recently find some that had gone to Belfast, and one had become a butcher, and he was there until the 1940s. And I found a photo of his shop front and a photo of him. So that was useful. But outside of that, they're a little bit of a mystery, and I'm still hunting for a little more. And I know Northern Ireland's a bit different from Southern Ireland. And yes, trying to get hold of those records is on my to-do list.
Yeah, but I'm sure you'll crack it, because you are the walking Sherlock Holmes. So what projects and ventures are you currently pursuing?
Well, there's always something going on. Relatively recently, it was this Friday, we published a Scottish set of modern and civil registers, and that's not complete by any stretch, but we started with an additional 3 million records that hadn't been online before. And then that also comes in with some records from family history societies, records from volunteers that transcribe different cemeteries and burial records that haven't been online. And so that is a start of a large collection that will cover this point. In Scotland, there's only one place to get these civil registers at the moment, and that's Scotland's People. And that's something where you may have a name that's more common, maybe Crawford or Smith or Brown or something, and it's very hard then to know that you're looking at the right person. So being able to search for it in new ways and being able to search for it differently might unlock something. It might mean that you only need to then buy one certificate rather than 20 to make sure you put the right one, for example. So it's going to be a really useful resource. And very, very soon, there's going to be a large collection of about, I would say, 12 or so million new Scottish records that are coming within a month or two. And that's what's been taking up a lot of my time at the moment. So that's going to be exciting. So I was focusing on Scotland, and there are some great Irish records coming as well. There are some lovely things. And all of these projects take usually up to about 2 years from arranging to say, yes, let's do this, for it to be published on the website. And there are so many hands that get involved and so many people that work on it all the way down the process. And I'm kind of at the coal face at the front, of this, talking to the original archive or library or society, but then it gets passed on to all these able hands who do all this clever stuff behind the scenes, and then it comes right through to being worked on. So there are so many plates spinning. It's really hard to pick one, but these are some big collections that have been working on for so long, and now they're almost there. I think it's going to really move family history forward a little bit, and I'm really excited to see what people discover.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of it on Twitter, especially for those I follow who are Scottish ancestry or people in that area. So, is there anything is there anything that you now know that you wish you knew when you started?
I think there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I quite like, and it's this concept in psychology that you think you know everything when you don't know very much. And then as you start to learn more, you realize how much is out there, and you start to become a bit more modest and start to realize, actually, I don't know everything. There's still loads more. And so you'll find people who may be at the start of their journey, who you may see on Facebook groups or something like that, very forcefully pushing across that this is where you find the answer. And actually, there's so much more. There's so much more that's not online. There's so much more everything else. And it takes a little while to get over that hump. So it may take people just a week. It might take them years. There might be plenty of people that have been doing it for years and are still in that position. But I think for someone to get me over that quicker, I think would have been lovely. I think when I started, again, exactly the same. It's not a rare thing. It happens to everyone. And I think being able to sit down and see the vast amount of material that's out there and the amount of things that can be used and seen, I think if someone were to show me that at the beginning, and maybe hold my hand a little bit and help me see all of this that's out there, I think I probably would have progressed a lot further, faster. But I think that's something that everyone goes through. And it's kind of a bit of patience we have to employ when we can see someone who's doing the same thing. We say, well, don't worry, we're all on this journey, and you might be towards the start of it, but we're all going to the same place. And we're all trying to work together. So it's something that you can forgive and you can understand and know that eventually it's going to get much better. It's going to get much easier. And people will have a much deeper understanding as they try these things, as they work through. So it's not something to be ashamed of as well. And just being aware of it really helps, I think, to get over it and to not maybe be too forceful or direct when making suggestions about what to do with family history, because of that understanding and knowledge that actually there's so much that I might not have all of the picture. There may be something else that I don't know that I could then factor in, or that might help me if I were to know about that and understand it a little bit more later down the line.
Fair point. Yeah, I do love to, someone holding your hand and help you. And and I'd say for me, no matter, I've been doing this 4 years now as of January, and I still feel like I don't know anything. It's just, you kind of see everyone else and they can think, oh my God, why can't I just, know how to do things, even though I probably do know how to do them. It's just, I just don't think I do sometimes. But
I think that I did when we talked about that first Who Do You Think You Are live that I went to, and I did a presentation there. We were all doing these presentations, and I did one about a family. I picked a family name that I found funny. So I did a family tree of the Womble family. And so I did this family tree of this Womble family who are from Derbyshire, and just used censuses and birth records and just went through and made this little family tree to show how easy it was to make a family tree. And there's a bit of a research exercise some time ago. I thought, I'm going to go back and see if I were to do this again, what would I do differently, and what would I change? What would I have done? And I think it was relatively rudimentary, using census and birth records and things, and that was it. But now I could go back, I could add these newspapers, I could look at different court records, I could look at other things, I could look at trade directories, postal directories, electoral rolls, and really build a broad, wide picture. And I think a need for education and a willingness to learn is something that all genealogists can benefit from. And I don't think anyone is at the end of that journey, and it's just going to keep going and going. And whenever I go to these presentations and I go to these conferences, I try and make sure that I see at least one presentation from someone, and they'll definitely usually I always leave knowing something new. And I've often gone to presentations about things that I've got no relatives from or anything. I did a presentation, a day of talks, and there was a great speaker. His name was Lee from the Jewish Genealogical Society of Great Britain. And he talked about Jewish research. And I don't have any Jewish ancestors, but it was fascinating to see the different approaches and the different ways that things were done and the different resources that they could use. And that was another way of inspiring and learning more. And maybe it might give me an idea of a different way to approach my problems and things. And so there's always something to learn. It's always really useful.
Fair point. I mean, I'm still fairly new to the presenting industry, although I have no idea how long that career will last. Right? So, what aspect of genealogy do you love the most? So, like finding old photos, looking at records, telling stories.
I think I'm a bit of a name collector. I think it's the idea of adding a new set of names to my family tree is really, really exciting. And I've been working backwards. And like you, I have, I think, 7 of my 8 groups of great grandparents. Is it great? That's the right. I think that's right. That's the one. I have to remember the numbers. I always get them slightly off. But I think that having an extra generation in there is really exciting. And I remember going to the Dumfries and Galloway Family History Society to talk to them about some records. And I had some extra time and had a look. And they found the obituary of I think it's my great-great-grandfather. And with that, I had death date, which is great. And I also then could put that in, found the record I needed, and then found that he had a second wife after the first one died, which is my ancestor. And then he had more children. I could find them and I could go forwards and I could add some more cousins. And being able to do that, I think really, really excites me. Having more names on the tree is brilliant. And it's great to then go back and tell the stories and add records and do things. But now when there's a new collection of records that comes out for a different place, so recently Hamilton in Lanarkshire is a place that cemetery records came, and I know I've got some 4th and 5th cousins from there, so I can go there straight away and say, oh, brilliant, this is useful for me as well. And it means that I can find new exciting things in more records, and I get to play in new areas. When I look at Sicilian records, they have a sort of census, the Rivoli di Beni ed Anima, the Register of Goods and Souls, which is always quite exciting. And it's a census that goes all the way back to the 1500s. And in that, some things really, really early, you've got line drawings of some of the peasants involved, so actual caricatures almost, attempted to be accurate. They're just not very good artists. But of these peasants, so I can see a drawing of an ancestor from 20 generations ago from records like this, but I can only do that when I've built that structure and I've got to the point when these records are useful. So to add more names and work further back and to know I've got another generation or I've done something else is really exciting. And the amount of times I've thought, I'm just going to have a little go, and then I find it's 3 o'clock in the morning because I've been going and I've started moving. I found a new cousin, and then I found their spouse, and I found their children, I found their grandchildren, and I kept going, and it just unlocks. And that's the thing, when I can break something down and just keep firing back, it's been brilliant.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I'd be allowed to do genealogy until 3 a.m. So I think you've got a bit more freedom in that sense, Myko. No, that sounds fun. If I stop, like, because I always kind of, you know how you saw like that flash of inspiration, kind of thinking, oh, what if I try this one? And then you're just finding yourself hitting the head against a metaphorical wall of the ancestor you've been struggling to find for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
That's typically me, because I tend to always go for the ones, that I am having trouble finding instead of the ones I can find. Which probably isn't any good for morale when it comes to trying to find things. Where you got to go, oh, I can't find anything, even though I can find more stuff on the 7 children they had, or the 3 siblings that they had. But I just go for the one that's just a pain. So there's my selectiveness. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, or mentioned it a little. What's an interesting story or event that you've discovered about your ancestors?
Oh, there are so many. I think I know that we recently did a little bit of a campaign where a lot of people that work for FindMyPast talked about an inspiring story from their family history. And I know I mentioned my grandmother and great-grandmother and my grandparents, but I have I think it's my 5 times great-grandfather who was executed for, it's counted as treason, but he was forging coins because he was one of these gun lock makers and ran out of money and needed to make money. So he started forging these coins. And because it's a likeness of the king, then that was not a done thing. And he was sent to be executed. And in newspapers, I found his last words and the description of his last moments. And that was really, really moving. He seemed to be, a guy trying his best and needing to make money and things. And he went through life. He had his children, had everything else. And his accomplices the sentences were commuted and they were transported. He wasn't so lucky. And the story of his final moments where he spoke to the priest, he went to the gallows and he just said, "I'm going to heaven," and then said nothing else, had the hood on and was hung. And that's a really moving thing to know the last words and to say them as well. I did a podcast with Dan Snow quite recently and got him to read some of his great grandfather's letters, his 10th great grandfather's letter asking for the hand in marriage of his 10th great grandmother. And we're saying these things that our flesh and blood has said, and there's something really magical and exciting about that. So being able to say those words, I think when I first read them, I did say them out loud and I was moved to tears and I thought, wow, this is my many times great grandfather's words. And so that is really inspiring and exciting. And so that story, I think, will always stay with me. And when lockdown is over, I'm definitely going to go to Stafford Jail, which is still there, and stand in the courtyard where he died and just to get a real sense of purpose and understanding of knowing what those final moments must have been like.
Yeah, I think many genealogists are going to be like it's just cabin fever, and then they think, right, we're going places, I don't care where, you're coming with me and I'm dragging you. Like, especially if it's a genealogist in the family, and so bring the family along with them, and they're like, do we really have to go? Yes. I think that'll be the cases for many. Sadly, that isn't for me. Even though I've kind of said, can we please go to whatever county library so that I can look for the undigitized census entry that's been driving me absolutely ballistic. The answer's been no so far, so I'm waiting for a chance. But I mean, if I did go to Waterford, Mineford, and Garvan, and the place where I had to go was in Waterford City, so it's kind of a bit off the beaten track if I did go. But I'm determined to go one day and find out what happened to my well, I know what happened to my great-great-grandmother, who's in a mental asylum for what looks to be I can never remember the name. It's kind of the way they phrased it, and I know what it actually is, but I can't remember the name. The way they phrased it was mania.
Oh yes, yeah. So there's melancholia, which is depression, and mania is the being a little bit hyperactive, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's
and apparently that was hereditary. So I don't know. And it was kind of, because I eventually found a photo of it, the asylum where she was in. Obviously she wasn't in it. I mean, I'm probably never going to have a photo of her. I've just accepted that. But she looks to have spent the last, she was admitted in 1898, so she spent the last, nearly damn it, 16 years of her life in that asylum. And if she was admitted in 1898, she probably wouldn't, like my great-grandmother probably wouldn't really remember her because she was born 2 years prior in 1896. And it was only kind of when I saw the census that my great-great-grandmother was in that I had the bombshell that she had a third child, which kind of made sense with the birth certificate of an Edmund Fraher, with the father Dan Fraher, mother Mary Walsh, which kind of made sense. And I was kind of like, okay, I haven't ever seen any mention of him in anyone's conversations or anything, so that was kind of nice to see. I can't find a death cert for him. But the fact that in my tree it just says born Christmas Day 1894 or 5, I can't remember what, and died before 1911. That's all. So I don't know when exactly he died, but he died before 1911 because there were only 2 children. That was my great grandmother and her brother. So yeah, that's another thing that I'm hoping. But it would be really nice to know where they were in the 1911, because in the 1901 he was with, because my great grandfather, the rebel figure that was imprisoned at 70 something, was a draper in the local in Grattan Square in Dungarvan, and he was with his son, but his daughter, my great grandmother, was nowhere to be seen, and I don't know where she went. I think I may have found one possible one, but she's with possibly an aunt of hers, but I can't confirm it. I mean, it adds up, like the evidence that I have, it adds up, but I just need like 1 or 2 things to kind of, try and nail it in. So one day I'm hoping I will find it, but no banking on it. So what type of record do you like the most and why?
In the morning. Wow. I mean, all during the day, at any point of day or night. I can always enjoy a census. I think censuses are that wonderful snapshot of history and a frozen point in time that tell you everything about a family, especially the ones that are later and are in their own words and are written down by the head of the household or copied over. So they are the ones that I think really interest me. I know the 1911 census for Britain, England and Wales particularly, because the original schedule survive, you get these bits of colour. You have, people listing their pets, their cats, their dogs, their budgies, all of those things, because those people are thinking that these pets are as much a member of the family as the son or daughter. And so that's really heartwarming. I know there's a lovely one I know of someone's teddy bear being listed as a member of the family and other sort of things like that. So there are lots of great moments in those, as well as the fact that they form the backbone of family history research as you go through decade by decade. So I do really enjoy a census. And I'm lucky enough, I said, with my Irish side, I've got some from the 1841 census in there as well. So I was relatively lucky in the very few that survive. I've got our family, our household on there, and I like those. Especially, I think it's the 41 and the 51. You have that wonderful extra bit of if someone was in the last census, they're not in this one, what's happened to them? Where have they gone? And you get, they've moved to Pennsylvania in the US, and they've died. And that bit of extra information, I wish was on every census. That is wonderful. That's something that, although there aren't many Irish censuses survive, I think you're incredibly lucky when you can find one because of that extra info.
And 2 things there. The kind of reaction I had, kind of thinking, I thought you had misunderstood the question. So if you or anyone watching was kind of wondering why I made that sound or was looking at me like that, that is why. Because I actually thought after saying it, I said, what type of record do you like in the morning or something like that? And you were going to say, well, in the morning. And I'm kind of thinking, that's what I actually thought you said. But anyway. And the second thing, I'm trying to be happy for you that you found something in the 1841. I'll just go in and bear it. So, quickly moving on. What does genealogy mean to you?
What's it mean? I mean, it's a sense of identity. I think genealogy is something that it tells our story. And as I said, we're only the custodians of family history. We'll pass it on to someone else at some point, and we're creating that knowledge of who we are. I think that the title of that show that is Run and Run and is watched by millions of people, Who Do You Think You Are? It really gets it right. I think that's what it is. And the fact that we can draw so much inspiration from our ancestors and who they were, what they did, I think that's magical. And I think that's what genealogy is really about. It's not just about looking at records or filling in the puzzle. It's about understanding a little bit more about what makes us us.
Fair enough. Now, for anyone watching on getting near end the questions from Myko, but I did what I did with Brad Argent last week, and that's do taking questions. So I have 2, although I kind of because I don't like hiding things, I did actually make up the second one. So just putting that out there. So if you have any questions for Myko, get them in now. Now, what advice would you give to a young person starting out?
I think the biggest thing I would say is that there are a lot of people in genealogy at different stages in their career, different sort of elements of progression. And there are some people that like to gatekeep family history and say that it's not for you, or you don't know enough, stay away, and this kind of thing. And I think I've seen myself a number of people who've been discouraged by people who are saying, well, yeah, I've got 25 years of experience, you shouldn't be doing this kind of thing and that sort of thing. And I think it's a little unfair that kind of thing happens, and I've seen it happen. And I would say that genealogy is for everyone, and to say we're all at different stages in our journey. And if you find a niche and a passion and something you're interested in, you learn more and you're thirsty for knowledge and try and find as much as you can out about these different things, then the sky is the limit. And don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something, because all you need to do is just focus and look for, inspiration, ideas, places that can teach you how to do certain things, and you can add strings to your bow and you can keep going, and there's no stopping you. I think education is wonderful, whether it's formal in the case of getting a degree or doing some kind of study at a university or something involving family history, or if it's informal, there are lots of different courses and short courses and presentations you can go and visit. A lot of them are online now. With lockdown, there's people doing things over Zoom, and all of that can really help just make you better. And if you're doing that and reaching out and doing that as much as you can, I think that there's just no way that you can't become a better genealogist and eventually maybe even the best. It's just a case of just not ever stopping looking for knowledge and trying to pursue that. And I think if someone tells you, no, you shouldn't be here or anything else, that they're the ones in the wrong. Genealogy is for absolutely everyone, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
I think you put that fairly well. So with the kind of audience of genealogy, so like being adopted by younger people now, do you think there is like a sufficient outlet for young people to connect with those of their own age, or just for them to kind of find like a beacon or something that they can go to and like, here are people my own age doing this?
I think, yeah, I mean, the social media in a way that I think has really only taken off in the past 5 or 6 years. So the fact that you can talk to each other on Twitter or start a Facebook group or that kind of thing is really useful and should be embraced. And it's a great way to connect with people. The networking that you can do with things like that is something to grab and to start making these connections and start helping each other and working together. I think that's wonderful. I think in terms of events or something like that, I think when you segment things by age, you lose a little, because there's plenty to learn from other generations and other things like that. And I think it's best that we're all in one thing together, and we're all sort of, and there's plenty that older genealogists can learn from younger genealogists in the sense of the passion and the excitement and things and the inspiration. So there's lots that everyone can teach each other. So I'm not so keen on splitting out events and things like that, but there are definitely perhaps a presentation for younger people. There may be a chance for younger people to get involved in presenting, and definitely all the social networks. There should be certainly groups of younger genealogists gathering together and talking to each other and trying to really get the best out of the things that they found, and to talk about maybe the problems they're having or the successes they're having as well.
Yeah, and I think kind of, because when I started out, it was, and I also think, and just to add, is kind of, if young people like me don't have a role model kind of to follow, that they probably might kind of think, oh, well, there's no one really into this. And a colleague of mine in Hidden Branch, that kind of said, oh, I joined Twitter because I saw you, like someone had told me about you being on Twitter, and I had joined Twitter because you were on it. And the person didn't think that I would respond or interact. that I was like someone who kind of, only interacted with, like a select few or some people on Twitter. And I was just kind of saying, of course I'm going to talk to you. Like, I mean, you're someone my own age. I mean, it's just like, the distant cousin that you're not, that you wish that you had kind of thing, but you obviously not related to them. But it's just kind of, of course I'm going to talk to you. I mean, it'd be fairly stupid not to. And I'm trying to put myself out there as much as possible, whether it's through this or social media pages or presenting, which I really hope goes down well. And I hope I gain people actually liking me rather than turning people off. But who knows? I have to wait probably until maybe late June. Anyway,
practice relentlessly. You'll be all right if you practice. You'll be fine.
Oh yeah, but nerves get me completely. So there don't want to be any questions coming in the comments, so I will go to the ones that were sent in on Twitter. Now it's a very short one, so don't worry.
Okay.
You'll get out of this. Oh no. I was just about to say I'm a pro at this now. But no, I'm not. Share. Never a good thing. Right. That, and please work. I hope that's working. No. So how do I locate someone in the 1939 register who I know died in 1955, and I provided it FindMyPast with the death certificate, but because I don't know where he was in 1939, they can't help me. It was most likely somewhere in Devon, but beyond that, I don't know. There are several redactions in the records of several family members, and he was aged only 15 or 16, but I can't find them.
So that is a relatively straightforward answer and question. The National Archives are able to look through these records in a way that we don't at FindMyPast. So at FindMyPast, you can have a record open, but you have to tell us where that record is. We can't search through the whole collection, but National Archives can. So if you ask them, and I think it's around about £20, I may be slightly off with the price, but they will be able to look through the whole country, and they will be able to see, especially if you give them a bit of extra information like you have, they, for that amount, will be able to tell you where they are. And if you then come back to FindMyPast and say, here's the death certificate, this is where they are, I know this is the household that they're in because I've been told because someone's had a look, then you'll be able to have that open really simply. So it sounds hopeless and impossible, but actually it's one of those things that there is an answer and it's relatively straightforward, and hopefully you'll be able to get that done relatively quickly.
Fair enough. And the second and final one, sorry I didn't have any others for you, but the second one is, what can you tell us about the 1921 census coming to FindMyPast? And this is the one that I came up with.
Well, it's the census for England and Wales, and of course the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands as well. The Scotland is held separately, and Ireland that has no 1921 census. And so we have been working on this for quite some time, and it will be published in the next year. And it's a wonderful moment because it's the last census that we're going to get for many people for a huge amount of time, if at all, because it's going to be a long time to wait. And I've changed my diet. I've started exercising. I'm hopeful, but fingers crossed. The next census that we're going to get, because of the 1920 Census Act, the privacy laws that we have in Britain of 100 years, is going to be the 1951 census. There was no census in 1941. The 1931 census was destroyed in the Second World War. And so we have the 1939 register, which is sort of useful, but we've got this big gap of 30 years. So this is the last big event that's going to be coming for family history and a census perspective for so long, and possibly in my lifetime. And so it's a big thing to really get as much as we can out of it. And it tells you all kinds of great things. So not only is it like the 1911 census, it also talks about the places that you work and gives you the address of where you work. So I know we have one place studies, one name studies, but you might even have one workplace studies and things like that might come from it. So it's a really exciting thing. And it was, again, the schedule's filled in by the head of the household. So we've got life in their own words. So I can't wait to see however many other dogs, cats, budgies, and everything else that are included in there. And that's going to be the first thing I'm going to be looking for. And I can't wait to see, Buster the cat, or Flossie the dog, or anything like that. And that's going to be the most exciting thing too.
Yeah, I mean, if it's 100 years and it's released the following year, so 2051 is 100 years,
quite possibly, yeah.
52. I'll be 49 at that rate. But I mean, 1951, yeah, that might. Although it might be the one after that will start being the handy one.
Well, they'll be every 10 years from then. So you're back on the road of decade censuses. Yeah. So then it's a bit easier.
But I mean, I can't wait for the 1926 to be released for Ireland. Oh my God! Like, I mean, this is like just give me the ones for my grandparents. Like, they're dead and all of their siblings are dead. Like, it's fine. It's not like you're revealing anything private. I need to know because there's a supposed Patrick Loftus thrown in there or something, and another brother, that of which I cannot prove because if either they were born after 1920 stopper on the records, or he didn't exist. I don't know, but I'd really like it to just show up right now. But I think I have to wait for a while, and I think if it's 2026, I will be 23. So I'll probably still be in college and just be antsy to get going with it. But I think it's just a time. It's not anything that's going to, take. It's not, it's going to be a instant thing. Like, it's done instantaneously, and another thing done off your bucket list. It's a continuous thing, and obviously time goes by, and probably so does the money for subscriptions, which you'll then kind of think, oh well, there's so much going for that and that and that, and then you're thinking. Right, and you wouldn't really want to know the total when you've packed it in. Anyway, I'm rambling off, so I'm going to catch myself and just say thank you so much, Myko, for coming on, and I've loved having you. And thank you to all the people watching and who will be watching or listening, as for those of you who don't know, these interviews will be going as audio versions. So that'll be a fun summer project, and some. So I have a website for it coming in the pipeline, but one thing at a time. So without further ado, I shall end. So thank you everyone for watching, and thank you to everyone who will be listening in the future when this does go up. So bye everyone.
Take care.